Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Excavation Site, playing as the forces of the Vampire Counts against the forces of the Dark Elves. And this is a bit of a fun matchup, I think, mostly because there's a lot the Dark Elves can bring to the table to threaten you as the Vampire Counts. So what I decided to do here is do a little bit of a mixed bag composition, bring a little bit of something to counteract enemy large, enemy cavalry forces, because of course Dark Elves can go very heavy on cav, as well as countering sort of infantry heavy compositions. Well, that might bring a lot of elite top tier infantry. Quickly running over the composition, I did decide to bring Manfred von Karstein here on a horseback. Decent combat lord, nothing fancy. He does have 3 spells, so I sort of cut down to the bare minimum. We got Spirit Leech, of course, very solid as well as always. Invocation of Nehek, as well as Raise Dead to disrupt enemy backlines. I also did bring Master of the Black Arts, as well as a Sword of Unholy Power to get that maximum power recharge rate. Of course, Manfred is an absolute beast as far as casting goes. Definitely one of the more powerful casters in the game, simply because he has so many different ways to get more Winds of Magic. And with the buffs he got recently, and as far as melee is concerned, of course, he got those alongside all the other Vampire Counts lords. He is now even better at staying in combat, sustained combat, to generate more Winds of Magic. For the front line here, nothing fancy. It's basically just chaff to soak up my opponent's charges, to just die slowly. A Skeleton Spear unit, the Tithe, as well as 2 units of Skeleton Warriors. Of course, these units are nothing special. They're not likely to do much damage, even to something like Dread Spears. But they'll buy us some time. Second line is really where there's a little bit more staying power, as well as a little bit more killing power. The Sternsman, of course, great anchor unit, lots of melee defense, very solid melee attack, and bonus against infantry, and of course they've got regen, so they're very tanky, very sort of survivable unit. And the 2 Graveyard Great Weapons, I think, are a bit of a niche pick, but they can perform very, very effectively against units like Blackguard. Now, sure, Blackguard is monstrous melee defense at 48, but the Graveguard does get a bonus for his infantry of 10, which means that you're hitting about 20% of the time, and hitting for about 50 damage a pop. So the Graveguard can hit very, very hard, and they can pretty quickly cleave through units like the Blackguard, especially for their relatively low cost, especially with the support of a unit like the Claw of Nagash, in a situation where Cav can struggle. And that is really the rest of the build here. We did bring the Claw of Nagash to melt down infantry over time. You sort of park it in the middle of your chaff and your supporting infantry blob, and then just let it sit there, draining away enemy HP, generating even more Winds of Magic, because Manfred totally doesn't have enough Winds of Magic already, and constantly healing the blob around itself. 2 units of Blood Knights, of course, providing some heavy anti-large shock force. This is an absolutely beastly cavalry unit. I absolutely adore them. I think they're great. There's not much to say about them otherwise, though. They're just so strong. On one end, we do have the Dire Pact over here in the woods. We also do have the single unit Dire Wolves on the other end, because I wasn't entirely sure where my opponent would deploy. He actually decided to push into me with his deployment a little bit, basically getting as close as possible and vanguarding a few Dark Riders with repeater crossgrip, those in the front, to get some early shots. Looking at my opponent's main line, it is a bit of a mixed bag of everything. Surprisingly, unit of Dark Shards. I don't really recommend stationary shooting against the Vampire Counts, but you can get some value that way. Of course, Witch Elves to protect the backline, some Blackguard, some Hargoneth Executioners, which of course are absolutely brutal against the Vampire Count infantry. They do a lot of damage. They're very offensive oriented. But that said, you can definitely do pretty well against them with, say, Graveguard with Great Weapons. Graveguard just hits so hard. They've got a lot of HP. They've got comparable hitting power, honestly. So if you can get a little bit more, if you can somehow compensate for the relatively low melee attack, they can honestly hit pretty hard and hit and do quite a bit of hurt to a relatively low HP unit like the Hargoneth Executioners. So, girls, you can see my opponent does push in, and he immediately fires a salvo against my Mortis engine, and having sort of suspected my opponent would go for something like that of that nature, I immediately sort of maneuver out of the way and do some crazy jukes, moves like Jagger there, avoiding the volley from the Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, who are then immediately zoned off. These guys have very short range, so they can't really push in and stay within range. And in the meantime, they are about to be pincered. You can see the Blood Knights charging in. Blood Knights, of course, do have a 30% shield save on top of 22% missile resist. Dire Pack coming in from the other end. Of course, these guys have absolutely monstrous weapon strength against large. They've got, I do believe, 14 bonus versus large, and you can see immediately these Dark Riders getting annihilated in the pits here. And I do immediately cast Invocation of the Heck on the Dire Pack so that they don't get collapsed. This is a unit you do want to keep around as best you can, just because they're such a powerful force on the battlefield. On the other end, this unit of Dire Wolves is pushing in, sort of trying to get in and do a little bit of damage. I do sort of get a little greedy, a little overextended, and dive into the Witch Elves. And unfortunately, these guys kind of small, so yeah, they're not going to have a good day. Even though I do try to pull them away, it is just too little too late. They are actually going to, I do believe, rampage here pretty shortly. We do get a little bit of a snare here on the other Dark Riders, but these guys are not going to be long for this world. Shortly, they are going to start rampaging, because, of course, once you lose, if you've watched my video on this, once you lose 25% of your HP, if you have the rampage effect, which is of course being applied here by the Witch Elves, you will start to rampage. And the problem with the undead units suffer from this, ironically, a unit that makes the least sense to be rampaging, suffer from this a lot worse than other units. Because where other units, if they get caught up and dragged into a very bad fight, sure, they get pulled in, they get sucked in, they start taking a beating, but they usually rout before another round of, before they get rampaged again, or second time. That's not true for the undead. They essentially can get perma-rampaged and they get murdered. So that is essentially what's going to happen here to these poor Dire Wolves, who are getting slaughtered by the Witch Elves in the pits, but I'm not able to control them and never will be, because they're never going to rout. Now my opponent did, I forgot to mention, bring a Sorceress of Fire. She is coming in with all of her spells. A little bit of a mistake in my opinion, because not all of her spells are that good, especially not the Flame Storm, which is a terrible spell if there ever was one. Still one of the few, honestly, useless or pathetic spells that still remain in Warhammer 2, and this is not something I'd say all lightly. I think most spells in Warhammer 2 are pretty competitive, but this is not one of them. And because of that, my opponent does not have Arnzupal's Black Horror. And get out, Wumbo. I hate how the Steam changed that. They changed the way the overlay works. As far as I'm aware, I'm not able to deactivate the information that I've got friends hopping online. But regardless, you can see over here we are going to immediately charge into the Witch Elves. Look, having learned how exactly the rampage system works, I feel pretty confident doing this with the Blood Knights, because I know that I've got, unless my opponent can drop me below 25% HP, the Blood Knights are going to be perfectly okay. We are going to be able to pull away from this fight. And we did quite a bit of hurt to these Witch Elves. In the meantime, you can see the Skeleton Warriors here harrying these Blackguard, and in the pits, the fight is really sort of breaking down. We're getting a bit of a slugfest here. The Graveguard with the Grave Weapons beating these guys down. In the meantime, over here on the flank, you can see slowly but surely the Claw of Nagash melting these Hargoneth Executioners away, terror routing the Dread Spears. Of course, Manfred is in here, hitting like an absolute truck. And we're slowly but surely chipping away at these enemy troops. You can see over here the Dark Shards getting routed. And we're actually able to get a flank here with the Blood Knights. We're going to get a meaty connection here on the flank on these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows and start whittling them down in a rather brutal fashion. You can see they're 20 models, 19, and they're getting completely destroyed. They were the last of their kind being forced off the map. Now, a very nice maneuver here with my opponent's Blackguard. He does actually get a bit of a surround or a bit of a flank with Blackguard, which is something you don't see all that often. But unfortunately for my opponent, the Claw of Nagash here pushed into units that can't really hurt it very effectively and draining the life out of all of these troops. And the Hargoneth Executioners, of course, starting to get sapped away. And of course, the two Blackguard also are going to start draining, losing their life, which is definitely pretty brutal stuff. On the flank, these Dread Spears getting hammer and anvil between these Skeleton Warriors and the Blood Knights, which of course is not where they want to be in life. And slowly but surely, we are chipping away. My opponent is using a Flaming Sword of Ruin here. Personally, I don't think this is a good choice. Flaming Sword of Ruin improves non-AP damage, which means, yeah, it's going to improve your Dread Spears a whole bunch, but you don't really care to have them buffed. The Sternsmen are not that heavily engaged here. There's still quite a few Tithe in the way. There's still quite a few Graveyard of the Grave Weapons, and that's really the only unit where you're going to get a major boost out of Flaming Sword of Ruin. I think if cascading Fire Cloak specifically targeted on the Hargoneth Executioners here would be a better idea. But that is just me. In the meantime, over here, the Blackguard is tying down these Graveyard of the Grave Weapons, trying to buy my opponent some time. You can see they're up to 100 kills. These are definitely a very powerful unit. If you've seen some of my other Dark Elf gameplay, I do sometimes bring these guys as my only front line, and actually often bring them as my only front line against the Vampire counts. They're just that strong. But now we are going to push the Mortis engine in, and you can see it's going to start doing that drain effect on the poor Blackguard. And really, the Blackguard are not meant for this sort of thing. They don't have enough HP. The way Chosen, this is one of the benefits Chosen have in comparison to the Blackguard. Chosen have a lot of HP, so they've got 8,000 HP. Now, sure, they don't have immunity to psychology, but Chosen, because they've got 8,000 HP, they've got a bit of a more of a buffer in their HP pool. So they take longer to die and longer to drop to a sort of critical level where they really start falling apart leadership-wise. And it's definitely showing here. You can see these Blackguard are pretty quickly tanking an HP pool just from having that Mortis engine sort of clipping a few on the edge here and draining away their HP. And it's definitely some brutal stuff. You can see they're losing about 12 HP a tick. And that, yeah, sure, they're cleaving through the chaff units, but the chaff units are getting healed in the process, and these guys are going down pretty quickly all of a sudden. In the back line, in the meantime, you can see once I did start having the Dire Pack rampage there by the Witch Elves. But before my opponent can get too much done, we do manage to sort of rout this pocket, leaving my opponent just 2 units of Blackguard and some Witch Elves, and he does decide to GG out at this stage. Quickly looking over the battle stats, we can see that Blackguard, of course, performing great. The Harganath Executioners performing pretty well. Honestly, to be expected. With this much chaff on the field, all these garbage units don't stand a chance against the top-tier elites. There's nothing much to be said there. But you know, it's okay. These guys are just there to soak up damage, and of course, they're there to allow the Mortis engine to do a lot of work. Now, looking at the other stats real quick, you can see the Blood Knights getting quite a bit of value in 67 and 105. Maybe not the craziest amounts of kills, but you know, they were focused on units like the Harganath Executioners, like Witch Elves, fairly high value targets. They managed to break the flank with the Dread Spears. And they managed to force off the Dark Riders very, very quickly. This is a fairly compact map, which is advantageous from that perspective. But between the two Blood Knights and the Dire Pack, we were able to force off the Dark Riders, who were a major threat, especially to the Claw of Nagash. And with that, we sort of secured ourselves. Manfred hitting the Sorceress with Spirit Leech, slowly but surely whittling her down, also providing that constant healing with Invocation of Nehek, Raised Dead constantly disrupting the backline. I kind of regret not bringing Van Hel's Dance Macabre. I think it would have been huge in this matchup. You can see the Graveguard, even unaugmented in any way. I didn't have a Corpse Cart, I didn't have any sort of buff coming in from Manfred, and honestly, that could have been huge here. Definitely Van Hel's Dance Macabre, in retrospect, could have been a massive boost for myself. But these guys still got 33 and 31 kills against units that are fairly valuable. Yeah, most of their attacks were going in against Blackguard and Harganath Executioners. Sure, and this isn't considering damage done as well. So, these guys are definitely doing some decent work. I definitely am not too I'm not say disappointed with Graveguard there, but I think they're a decent unit, especially when it's getting proper support. I definitely think an Invocation, having a Dance Macabre here could have been a huge damage booster for these guys. And in retrospect, probably would have been a good idea. I could have downgraded the Tithe to normal zombies or something and made room for some extra magic that way. The Claw of Nagash, great job as always. 75 kills. Most of those against high-value targets, most notably the Harganath Executioners, also probably to an extent the Blackguard that came in right later on. Absolute beast of a unit. You just have to be very careful that you don't get it killed early on. My opponent could have gone after it with fireballs. He could have perhaps, if he had been a little more careful with Dark Riders, he could have gone after it with some crossbow fire. This is personally why I like bringing the Charybdis in this matchup, because it's a good unit for shutting down units like the Claw of Nagash or Mortis engine. But now that it has to engage in melee to get that damage effect, I think they're a pretty good choice. But nonetheless, definitely performed well here. For my opponent's build, not bad. I don't agree with the choice of Dark Shards for the backline. You shouldn't. I don't think it's really worth it to bring Dark Shards. These guys got 53 kills, but I think most of that was zombies. I don't even remember them really firing much at all during the game. They really didn't get that much done. The Supreme Sorcerer Fire, not getting the most value. Sure, she roasted some chaff, but once again, it's just chaff. Witch Elves, but that said, I do believe Lower Fire is very important in this matchup, because you do want Flaming Sword of Ruin to counteract enemy ethereal units. And for that alone, it's a very strong spell selection. The Witch Elves doing some good work, but mostly once again against chaff, like the Dire Wolves, maybe a little bit against the Dire Pack, some summoned zombies, that sort of stuff, which is a huge waste for such an expensive unit. And of course, the Elite's doing well. In general, I would just recommend doing a mass Blackguard strategy. Have the baseline of your army just be Blackguard. They work really well because they've got immunity psychology, they've got a bonus versus large, and they've got very heavy armor. very high melee defense, all of which are pertinent against the undead. Regardless, good get to my opponent. SOS Firestorm here, quite an appropriate name given the choice of fire there, of lore fire there. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions about the game, anything like that, be sure to share them down in the comment section, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.